So any party that I have, I'm gonna have music. So happy Black History Month. Happy February 2nd. Happy Wednesday. And hello, wherever you are in the world. My name is Vonda Page, and welcome to my virtual welcome party. And so, what we're going to do today is we are going to have a party. And if you get a chance to join live, great. Make sure you join and say something in the chat. If you happen to catch this later on the replay, great as well. You can still respond and reply in the chat. So, for those of you who are going to watch this for the first time, let me give you a little bit of information in case this is your first time logging onto this platform. One of the things that is so great about Crowdcast and about Living Corporate TV, Living Corporate Network, is that this is a persistent community. So once you have logged on and watched one of our live shows live, you are included. And so any conversation that happens in terms of any chats that get put in, any poll questions, any links, you will have access to that because this is a community. And so speaking of community or segueing into community, right? That's what I'm here to talk about today. And that's what this alliance is about. And so the way I am going to kick it off is I am going to talk a little bit about myself first, because I never know if this is going to be somebody's first or second time or, fifth time seeing something that I'm doing or knowing anything about me. But what I really want to do is just make sure that you know who I am and why I'm here. And then I'm going to get into what the party is all about. And I'm going to get into, what this community that I want to talk to you about. So, first of all, nice to meet you. And I want you to know that whether you get a chance to log on live or you get to see this sometime in 2022 or sometime next year or whenever, you are always welcome into my community. My name is Vonda Page. And by way of background, I grew up in Philadelphia. I went to Temple University and LaSalle Universities, both which are in Philadelphia. I have both of my communications degrees from those two schools, and in addition to that, I've been leading positions within employee relations, technology, and a whole bunch of different fields over the past 32 years. And in 2020, I decided to begin stepping out on my own, and I founded a tech company called Radical Change. In 2021, I formed a amazing partnership, and out of that partnership grew a numerous amount of ideas and endeavors, some which are going to be on hold for a little while. But one of the things that grew out of that was what I'm calling the Global Center for Future Forward Thinkers, which is a think tank focused on the future of work. And as a matter of fact, we are having our first Future of Work symposium on February 15th and 16th, 2022, starting at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time. And you can email contact@gcfft.com. That's the Global Center for Future forward thinkers, right? Because we know that the future of work is something that is tremendously important. And regardless of what type of roles that you have, you are going to be affected by the future of work. We all are. And so, the future of work, it encompasses a lot of things. And you'll hear some people using the term, futurists, and a lot of things that the futurists, are studying are things that you will, see in The Economist and things on, Bloomberg and places like that, right? But the thing to understand is that the future of work is not just about technology. The future of work is not just AI and the impacts. The future of work is not just, how many people are going to have to get jobs in coding versus which things are going to be taken over by robots and machines, right? The future of work is more than that. The future is also about how we are going to apply digital transformation, that whole era of moving towards, digital for everything. How do we look at that in the context of people? How do we look at that in the context of humanity, right? And how do we look at that when it comes to knowing that we need to change and get new systems? So anyway, I'm going to have 11 or 12 total, 12 amazing need to know thought leaders. I'm calling them need to know thought leaders because some you may or may not have heard of, some you may or may not be following or listening to or watching or reading, but these are need to know thought leaders. And so I cannot wait to bring them on. The Future of Work Symposium on Digital Transformation and Accountability is going to be 2 days. There's going to be 10 talks. And like I said, there's 12 need to know thought leaders, including yours truly, Vonda Page. But back to the party and why we're here today. So and who I am. So I don't want to say that I fell into the diversity, equity, and inclusion space accidentally, because I don't believe anything happens by accident. And also, when I think about the history of my career, whether talking academically or professionally, I have actually formally been in the DEI space, the inclusion space, for almost 28 years. So almost 30 years, because my first actual formal introduction to organizational dynamics and organizational culture, it happened when I was taking graduate school courses. And then I took numerous ones that had that same sort of curricula, right? Where you think of it as a communications and HR MBA, if you will, right? So those kind of courses, but there was a lot of emphasis on professional communication and how that shows up in the workplace. So when I think about, how I'm with you today, live on February 2nd, 2022. Oh, 222, which is cool, right? All the twos of the day. Um, that I have had an interesting life. I've had an interesting career. Some of you who have been maybe familiar with my story know, like I said, I grew up in Philadelphia. And even though I grew up in a upper middle class Black American family, I grew up in an abusive household. And so that experience really, shaped who I am, and actually shapes my voice. It shapes my passion, and it shapes, why I'm here. And one of the reasons that I'm here is because I know that it is super important to focus on the future. Because I can tell you, there have been many times when I was young where I felt like I could just give up because I just thought life was just terrible. I mean, it was terrible in the house, but outside, man, I made the most of it, right? So I always knew that tomorrow was going to come. And no matter how bad that evening went or that afternoon, that at least, if it was a weekday or a Sunday, I could go to school the next day, right? Or I could, go play with one of my friends or do something else, right? And so it's kind of, for people who grew up maybe Christian or Baptist, or in America, Baptist, Black Baptist churches or whatever, how we talk about joy cometh in the morning, right? So when I think about joy cometh in the morning, I think about the future being better. And that makes me also think about how the future of work is going to impact us as human beings. But as all of this technology, right, is advancing and moving forward, we can't forget that as human beings, right, that this we're playing for something bigger, right? We're playing for something bigger than the next iPhone, for the next pair of VR glasses. We're playing for something bigger than being able to have all your money electronic and never ever been able to have a dollar bill or a penny. It's so much beyond that, and it's going to be really important to connect those dots in different ways. So on one level, right, we can connect those dots from the standpoint of work and looking at the work that we do as individual people. But more than that, how does the work that we do as individual people, what does that work look like when we impact others, right? So if we are, I think about, I just had an image of a horrible job that I know exists, which is those people who work on social media platforms where people can upload videos. And there's certain people who they have to scan for bad stuff, right? For crimes and things like that, right? What a horrible damn job. But just the fact that somebody has to do that, right? Because they won't make the algorithm such that it could keep those kind of images, right, from getting uploaded. No, make a human have to go through the trauma of watching terrible things happen, right? 5 days a week or 6 days a week or 40 hours a week or wherever it is. When they could actually do things right algorithmically or legally to keep people from uploading terrible stuff. Now, if I get on a tangent talking about all the things that tech companies and other companies are doing that are terrible and wrong, that our government is letting them do, we could be talking about that stuff all day. And this is a party. So who wants to be talking about that? What I want to be talking about is this community that is coming together. And I don't want to say the community that I'm bringing together, because even though, I'm leading the community, I don't consider it my community. I consider it our community. So I'm going to start by saying that, because of my career, I am 52. I grew up, hard and good. I grew up with a lot of love, but I grew up also with rejection and pain and neglect at the same time. But at the same time, I didn't let all the things that were wrong keep me from not appreciating the things that were right. And so when I think about pulling together, right, a community of people that that when I think about, let me just back up. When I think about my career, right, I told you I went to school in Philly. I studied communications. I've had a bunch of roles and positions in leadership, in media relations, employee relations, public affairs. And then I've been in tech in probably 90% of those roles where I've done different things, such as tech support for CEOs, CFOs, things like that, right? Within my specialty, which is technology, I've worked in, enterprise architecture and infrastructure. I've worked on cybersecurity and also, of course, portfolio and project management, which I've been doing since 1984. But besides all of that, right, working in big tech, working other big companies, worked in management consulting, consulted on my own, Philly, Chicago, Detroit, the Gulf Coast of Texas, Silicon Valley, Ohio, Delaware, New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, little bit of Pittsburgh, which, Pennsylvania, and then I spent some time in publishing and pharmaceuticals a little bit. And in through all of that, probably from 18 to about 28 is the time that I spent in food service and catering in hotels, had my own catering business, catering for people who were country club members. I've worked at 2 country clubs and a university club, which now I happen to be a member of one here in Portland, Oregon. But I say all of that to say that I have been around a lot of powerful people. I've been around people who are in charge of making important decisions. And, I think one of the things that happens when you are a Black woman and you are around, a lot of powerful people and people in high positions, they talk and they don't think you're listening, or they see you as invisible. And so they, say whatever. But the whole time I've been sitting in corporate America and sitting in these spaces and doing these jobs and having these roles, being underpaid, undervalued, underappreciated the entire time, right? I always knew that a better future was coming, regardless of what was going to happen. But I also know that that better future is not a future that is just led by one person, that is not specific down to, if we want to say, how we are trying to specifically call out who we are trying to gather and who this community is. And one of my goals, and I have several for 2022, but one of my goals is to be very clear on my boundaries. And, I love a lot of the, I'm just call them thought leaders, who talk about things like boundaries, right? Like Katrina, who has an amazing show called Absolutely Not. One of my boundaries is that am not going, or I get to choose how I show up. I get to choose my language. I get to choose what I do because fortunately, for me, I am self-employed. And so, I get to use the words and say what I want. So first and foremost about this community, this group, it is an open group. It's going to be an intersectional group. It is going to be an intergenerational group. It is going to be intereducational, intersocial, economic, interfaith. Um, but this group does not have men in it. And I'm gonna say that again. So this group that is coming together, there's no men. So that literally is it. So rather than, play all these games with, you know, um, pronouns and acronyms and substituting letters, this is a group of people who are not men. Period. No mistake, no apology. That's the tea. I'm gonna get a sip of water. I'm pulling together a group of people, but there are no men invited in this group. How many groups are there where women are not invited? For everything that started as a thing here in America, how many of them started as all men? Right? So, why is it as women or as non-binary people, why are we so afraid to say, I want to have a group with no men in it? Now we have things like sororities, and the Eastern Star and other organizations that are gender specific. But why, when it comes to, I don't know, this kind of work or these kind of groups or whatever, I don't know, why can't we say that? Well, I'm saying it. And so what I'm looking at it as, and the term that keeps on coming to my mind, as it's really, the original Black feminism, right? The Black feminism is intersectional, is intergenerational, is intersocioeconomic, is intereducational, is interfaith, is inter everything. But this group doesn't have men in it. And I'm not going to say that men cannot be feminists, because we know that's not true. We know the definition of a feminist is a human being, right, that supports equal rights, okay, for all people. Like, we know that, period. And I'm fine with that. But here's my thing is that, because of, I'm going to just call it capitalistic, white supremacy delusion, and totally that is a borrowed thing from a combination of several scholars and thought leaders. So that's not my term, I'm just using it. But when I think about how those of us who grew up here in America, or who grew up in American culture, so that can even be people who, if you did grow up in Asia or Europe or Africa, if you are in a culture that is dominated by like white American culture, like those of us who live in America, we have very similar ways of thinking, right? We have consumed very similar media. I mean, there's very few Black people that are my age, that are 52, going to be 53 in 2022, that can say they never saw any white television. They only ever got to watch Black television their whole life. No. We, maybe had one or two shows on at any point in time that had black people on there until, when Good Times and the Jeffersons and All in the Family and the other show was on all at the same time. They in the 70s, right? It was black people on all those shows. But but you can't say that you only ever got to watch black television because that really didn't exist. So all of us, right, who consumed American media, we are socialized into this whiteness. And so knowing that, right, knowing who controls those jobs, right, knowing who makes those decisions, we know who those jobs are, right? Now, I read some stats yesterday, which are really good information because we are making progress, which goes to why I say don't ever give up on the future, right? Because we're making progress. Because whereas some recent studies, maybe from a year or two ago, said that white men had 70% of the leadership positions, the study I read, which was reported in The Economist yesterday or the day before, but I'm not sure where it was from, said that that number is 65%. So that means that some people are making a come up. Now, I didn't read all the details, so I don't know if black women are making a come up. I kind of doubt it because we know black women are leaving the workforce in droves. We know women are leaving in droves. And there is a statistic around this being the lowest point that this number of women have been in the workforce since 1980. So chew on that. In the year 2022, and these stats are from 2021, I believe, November or December, this is the lowest amount of women who've been in the workforce since sometime in the 80s. So since like 30 years ago, more so. So that being said, right, I'm saying that to say that it's okay for uh, the rest of the non-men it's okay for us to get together and plan and work and do stuff because I think that there's a different energy happening. I don't think there is a different energy happening. Not only is there a different energy happening, there's a different goal, right? And the goal is for us to really build bonds, right? Really build relationships, really grow and learn, right? From each other, but to be able to, as a non-black person, as a non-black woman, especially, right, be able to understand and know, like, hey, this is how we make change together, right? So we have to get to know each other. We have to have that courageous space and opportunity where we get to be who we are and be each other. So I want to start by asking a couple of questions because I see we got a couple people live. Hey, I see Dawn and Liz. So when y'all get a chance, type in. I know Dawn is on the East Coast now, but I want to know from people, what is your what town do you consider your hometown? Number one, do you consider your hometown the city where you were born? Do you consider it the city where you grew up? Do you consider it the city where you spent the most time? Do you consider it where you live now? What is your hometown? So for me, I think people who know me know my hometown is Philly. And so, when I think about my hometown is where I grew up. It's if you ask me where you from, I say I'm from Philly. One of the things that people ask here on the West Coast, which I had to get used to, and I know a lot of people aren't used to it, especially if you come from the East Coast, especially if you're from New York or Philly, you like be ready to fight when somebody say where you from. Now, when they say it over here, they say it like they trying to be nice. They just trying to ask because they know you're not from here. They don't know where, but they just know because it's so small like that. And so, although it seems kind of like amazing, like how can it be so small? How can people like think they know everybody? Because if you live in a town with like 2,000 people, they do know everybody, right? Because there's like two stores, one this, one that, one whatever, and people talk, right? When you grow up and you somewhere from somewhere big, You ain't gonna never ask somebody that because they like think you ready to fight. Why you want to know where I'm from? What's it to you? What's your business? You trying to say I don't belong here? Well, it's a little different. And so these are things that I've come to learn, when I'm around different people, but I also have a different experience, right? So for me, I went to school in all white spaces from age 17. And I've been in, all white spaces ever since, right? In corporate, even though I went to college, where there was, plenty of black people, but in all my jobs that I worked in corporate or, in service, it was usually maybe me and one or two other black people. And so, I, I've been in this proximity well enough to just kind of understand that it's really important when you are not just when you're only 6% of the population, but when you're really thinking about, how to move things forward and how to make a better world for everyone, how it has to be intersectional at all levels, right? Like for me, I don't want this community to just be people that only found out about it because they on LinkedIn. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing that starts today is like really ramping up all my social media stuff, right? And so people are going to be able to find out, right, about I'm calling it the Vanguard Alliance or the Future Vanguard. Sorry, Future Vanguard, right? So my big project that I'm working on, my think tank is called Future of Work. So I'm calling this initiative the Future Vanguard because we are vanguards of the future. That is what we need to be, and that is our role because the men have not been doing the job. Can we get real? Can we be frank? Can we be candid? Can we be for real? Men haven't been doing the job. Why we keep putting them in charge? Okay, well, this is for the pink pussy hat people. Why y'all keep putting them in charge? Well, what I'm going to say is because y'all don't know any better. Because you really haven't dealt with the things you need to deal with, which is aligning yourself, right, with who you are and figuring out your own purpose. And so I'm like super happy for anybody that's trying to figure themselves out. And I don't care where you are on the journey, you welcome to come along with me. But you just need to know, right, that even though it's going to be a very low barrier to entry, there's going to be an extremely high standard to uphold. And that standard, number one, first and foremost, right, is that you got to be real with yourself. So my other goal, under it's not another goal, but part of my boundaries goal, right, is I'm not gonna have people in my inner circle that can't be real with themselves and be like, hey, I got this going on, I got that going on, I got this going on. Because you have to start at some point, right, to be able to look at yourself in an honest way. And it doesn't matter what area it is, but we all got tons of stuff we got to work on. I tell people all the time, I remember when a childhood friend of mine, we were in sixth grade, and this person grew up in extreme poverty with a little bit of abuse. I grew up in no poverty with a lot of abuse, but it was all abuse. And we used to say, I can't wait to get old enough to have some money to sit on somebody's leather couch. And we used to know, right, at the age of 12, 13, 14, that we were going to need therapy. Now, yeah, maybe that's a little advanced, and we were already planning, she was already planning where she was going to go for college and all of that, right? But I always knew that therapy was going to be part of what was going to be necessary because I knew that my life that I was dealing with wasn't right. And I knew that that was damaging me. Now, I didn't know how because I never was a person that was crying. And if I did go through any depression, I didn't go through a depression in a way that I'll do air quotes you think you see on a depression commercial. Somebody in a fetal position, somebody crying. I don't do that. But a lot of Black women, a lot of people who are trauma survivors and people who, had traumatic childhoods or traumatic incidents, everybody deals with trauma and stress a different way. I always keep it going. But what I do know is that when you have somebody to talk to, when you have friends, when you have people that get it, when you have people you could be candid and real and you could be yourself with without them judging you, I know that's great. But what I also know, and this goes back to boundaries, right? Is that I myself am going to keep my circle small from the standpoint of people have to have been doing some work on themselves constantly, because we all need to be doing work on ourselves. Now, me personally, I'm just extremely lucky that I have health insurance, and I'm extremely lucky because it's literally luck in America that you have health insurance. It's luck, okay? It's not fortune. It's luck and some fortune, but it's luck if you have health insurance, because it's really the benevolence of your employer and the type of relationship that your employer has with the healthcare provider, and how they feel about you, as to what you can afford and what you can have. So I wish um, healthcare resources on all human beings, because we all are deserving of it. And in the future world, in the real world, in the good world, that is, we're going to have to make better choices and better things. Everybody will be able to have health care, but more so, our systems won't be so harmful to us. So all of those things, right, are about the future, not just the future of work, but our future. And so when we think about our future, right, we can't do this alone. But like I said, right, the men have been in charge for millennia. They've been in charge since the beginning, all over the damn world. I'm not saying that some of them that's not good, but what I'm saying is they doing a shitty job, and they damn sure not doing anything for us. If you are listening to me right now, does your school, your job, the public facilities, the doctor's office, the public restrooms in your state, do they have free tampons and pads in the slot for you to just grab out and take? Or do you have to pay a quarter or 50 cents? Or are there none in there? Think about it. If men had a period, do you think a box of pads would be $7, $8, or $9? Do you think little pieces of cotton, 30 of little pieces of cotton, would be $8, $9 with some plastic? You think they would have all that plastic? You think they would come, it would even come like that? You think people would be able to make money off of it? Women's health care is higher. Women, once you have a baby, that's a pre-existing condition. No matter how young or old you are, once you give birth, now you become, that's a condition. I found that out, I don't know, years ago. So this is a group that, no men, because we don't need them, because to me, they don't have anything else to contribute to our liberation, and they damn sure don't have anything to contribute to my liberation. They are in control of the power. Yep. And the seats, yup, and the privilege, yup. But the reason is because a lot of us, the rest of us, right, the ones who don't want them to stay in power, who know that they cannot do the job and know that we need to change things, right, the rest of us, we know that we need to do stuff different. And so this is how we do it. We come together, okay? And so this community, it's no men. It's people over 18. You do have to have a digital connection. So what do you need to be part of the community? You need to be over 18. You need to not be a man. And you need to understand that you have to have a digital connection, because this is how we're going to connect. You better use it from any device, right? Any screen, but this is how we're going to connect. We're going to, have a balance of public and private, opportunities to get together and meet, but things to understand. This is not a therapy session. It's not advice. It's not sales. It's not marketing. It's not HR. It's not DEI. It's not anti-racism. It's not academic. It's not philosophical. But what it is real. It's intersectional. It's intergenerational. I want people as young as 18 and as old as 180. If there's anybody that old. I think the oldest person in America now is that lady who was 113 last year. The black lady. And then there was another lady that was like 109. But I want them to spend their time with they loved ones. They don't have time to be messing around trying to get on these devices. But the idea, right, is that we want a large intergenerational community. We want an inner socioeconomic community and an intereducational interfaith community. Okay, so for those who registered, party time. For those who registered ahead of time for today, I have the Hush Money book series, book 1 and 2 for you. So I'm going to look on here and see who registered. I think that it was Dawn, Belong by Dawn. And who else registered? Oh, Beverly registered. Beverly gets the Hush Money book 1 and 2 series. If she already read it, if you haven't read Mend the Hearts Right Within, you get that book instead. But I have 5 copies of the Hush Money book series that I'm giving away to the first 5 people who register for today's party, because it's kind of like, a party, you need party favors, right? And so that will be our take home party favor. All right. So just now, you're welcome. You got it. Absolutely glad to have you. These books are good and we need to get them out. And then, I love books so much that I like talking about the book, not like the story as much as, because I think you should save the story for people who haven't read it, but to talk about the book from the impact that it has on you. Because for me, I do a couple of things. I mostly listen to my books, because then I get to read more books and I get to go back to just certain sections and then imprint it in my brain. And so I read books on the, what do you call it? Only audio. Then I read them on Kindle. And then I also, read the paperback books. But my problem, if I buy a paperback book, if it's not in a hard cover, I tend to use that as the copy that I take notes on, and then it messes it up. And then I have to get the second copy because I like to always have a clean copy. So I'm like a 4 book per book person. And the thing that I love about books when they're so well written like Jackie's books is because it's a such a good riveting story, it makes me think about other stories. And so when I think about, accountability and how Jackie brings it up in the book by weaving out the story, it's like people just have to have a book. People have to have the book. People have to have the story because they just need to know, right? There are ways that no matter how bad something might look, and she talks about Ebony, contemplating everything, right? Suicide, homicide, the whole, like when you get to that point, you gotta know that there's a better around the corner. There's a better future ahead. And what I know, no matter what, I'm telling you, and I've seen it happen not only in my own life with friends and people that I know, I've seen it in the stories of other people that I know. I've seen it in the stories of strangers, and I believe it and I feel it deep down in my soul, in my spirit, and in how I'm connected to people in the universe, that when we come together, it doesn't matter all of the things about us that is different, because when we come together, it doesn't matter because it's so many things that we have in common. So now you're on, Beverly. I can do some of the things I was hoping to do with a couple of live people, right? So one of my questions, because I'm going to prove the point about how many things we all have in common, about how we all have way more stuff in common than the thing that men, and it's men in power, make us think we are all so different and we're not. So if you were alive, in the, because I don't know how old anybody is, except for I know how old I am. I'm 52. So I would like you to, if you watch television in the 80s, right, type in 1 or 2 names of the television shows that you watched in the 80s that you liked, right? It could be a comedy, it could have been a drama, but type in like a couple of names of TV shows that you liked. So in the 80s, if I remember, I'm trying to remember. I think Facts of Life was a show in the 80s, unless it came out in like 79. I love that show. Why? Because Kim Fields is on there. Kim Fields was Tootie. She was the black girl, right? And people used to tell me I look like her. They used to tell me I look like Janet Jackson. I look like a lot of people, I guess. I don't know. But that was like one of my favorite shows, and it had a catchy little song, and I used to run and couldn't wait to watch it. Another one of my favorite shows in the 80s, of course, was the Jeffersons. So I was born in 69, right? So the 70s, like I'm basically on the decade. So the 70s, I grew up, what do you call it? Classic rock, plus of course 70s R&B music, right? 80s, I grew up, so I was between 10 and 20 years old in the 80s, right? I was between 20 and 30 in the 90s, like that. So I grew up with each decade. So I consider myself like an 80s kid for the most part, is where I kind of came, of age. So I was talking to my dear friend Alyssa today, and we were talking about terms and expressions. And I was telling Alyssa that I was trying to remember how I started using this term that I know I say, or I don't really say it now because now I'm super aware and conscious of it. So I focus on not saying it. But this term that I use that people probably also use, lame, Lame, right? So, and I don't use it to describe other people. I'll use it to say to myself. So I might say, comma, quote, oh man, I should have got a bigger glass of water. Oh, that is so lame. Now that sounds really dumb, right? Number one, it sounds dumb because why would I be criticizing myself about not getting a bigger glass of water or whatever? It's stupid. It doesn't even make sense. Number two, why would I use that term? Well, what I realized is that it was some show in the 80s. Maybe it was like Saved by the Bell, one of those shows or whatever, where they used to say, this is so lame. He's so lame. She's so lame. This is so lame. And it was like lame if you don't go to a party, lame if you don't do this, lame if you don't do that, lame, lame, lame. And so I think because I remember, being in conversations and hearing that word all the time, it stuck with me. Now I don't say the word because I've catch myself before I say it. Is it still in there? Yes. Is it still part of my conditioning? Yes. Is it something that I know that as I have more of an intersectional group of people that I'm around, that is going to help me be more aware and cognizant about how I talk about people with disabilities or language that I use? Yes, right? But it's just like anything else. When we stay in our same circle, when we don't grow, when we don't, expand outside of our comfort zones, right? Then we never get beyond that. So imagine if all the people that I was around all the time use that term, I probably would still say it. I'm not around any people that use that term, right? Because I said I'm trying to keep my circle of people who are trying to grow and learn and develop. So even if it's a term that they might have been used to saying before, it's not a term that they would use now. So I have my fireplace on, and I think I'm getting a little dehydrated because I probably had it on too long, but it must be okay because the dog is still laying in front of it. And so yeah, so so back to the community, right? And what we are about, right? Intersectional, intergenerational. We want all levels, all faiths, all people, right? And we're going to do 8-week increments. And so first thing to know, right, in this first one that we're going to kick off next week, I have invited all of the previous participants from the cohort that I was part of in September to join us. So people will be joining at different times. I mean, the idea is that it's open, right? And once we have one cohort, we stay involved, we stay connected, and eventually, right, people, you should be able to spin off your own cohort of people where you are just building in this community, right? Because the idea is, number one, right, we want to build real connections, right? And we want to build these connections across, right, an intersection of people who are not men. And literally that's what I'm saying. And because this is what it is, it's people who are not men. I mean, and that does also go for people who are two spirit, individuals, right? If you're two spirit, if and we can have more conversation about it, but if it's if that two spirit part, or if that means that you identify as a man, this is not the community for you, because this community is number one is woman led. That's me. But number two, it's a real different kind of a space. And so while we definitely want people who are not men, if the two spirit conversation arises, we can have that offline. But this is not that community. This community is not for men. It's for women, and it's for non-binary people. But it really doesn't matter where you are, right, on that spectrum, because it's not about that. This is about building connections. But we are going to learn, right, how to have those relationships and how to really create them with people who are different, right? So one set of conversations that I'm super eager to have is I'm very eager to have conversations with Muslim women who are of different ethnic backgrounds, like, so being white and being black, right? And me growing up Baptist and Christian, right? Like, I have so many questions that I only would feel comfortable asking that in a certain space and in a certain way, in a way that I know it would be feel safe. And so for a person that's not black, right, whether Latin, whether white, Asian, it doesn't matter, indigenous or African, considering yourself, if you're an African, right? And I can't wait to have that conversation if anybody wants to have it. My take is this: I am black because I am an American. And that is the name I have to have, and I am, because I am an American, I'm black. If I was in Africa, I would be Nigerian, because according to one of the American DNA companies, I am 89% Nigerian and like 94% African overall, which I'm super happy about. But if I was in Africa, I would just be Nigerian, and it would only be on my passport. And it wouldn't matter how light or dark my skin is. I just would be Nigerian. But because my ancestors are part of the transatlantic slave trade, I'm black. So I don't want to be ever called an African American. Now, when I go to Africa, I'm going to see about what it looks like to get me some real African papers, and how do I become African, because I think that would be super cool. I would be like African Black American. Ooh, that would, like, I would have three things. But I refuse to be an African American because I refuse to take the hyphen. Okay, because that's racist, right? And so these are the things that we're going to talk about. What we're not going to do is we're not going to be talking about things that can get Googled very easily. So I'm not going to be talking about the history of feminism from, like some historical detail in 1972 this happened, in 1943 that happened. I'm not doing that. What we're going to talk about is what are the results of some of the things that's going on. We're going to have real world stories and examples. We are going to be procedural from the standpoint of how we process stuff, but we also want to process in a way that's not harmful. So, for example, right, I'm going to be sending out some Google forms, or one Google form, and it's going to ask you a bunch of questions. And the reason it's going to ask these questions is because it's going to help me figure out, like, how we run the cohort, when we do some of the groups, how we need to put people into groups. So for example, right, depending on certain things, maybe we might do a group of, that's mixed of ages, right? But then maybe I might say, okay, well, anybody that's a millennial and younger, get in this group and answer this question. And everybody that's me, a Gen Xer and up, we get in another group and then we share. So I'm going to ask some different questions around, your age, around if you grew up in the city versus what do you call it, suburbs versus rural, and some things like that, right? So we can just have a really good idea. And what it's going to do is it's going to help us have a really robust discussion in a process oriented way, but it's going to also help us learn. It's going to help us process, and everybody is going to have, something that they can practice individually on their own. So for example, I'll use myself as an example. If we're gonna, each session that we do is gonna be 25-minute increments, right? So we're gonna do 25 minutes, and then we're gonna take a break. Then we're gonna do 25 minutes, then we're gonna take a break. Right. And so it's gonna be segmented and give us time to process. But then, right, during that week before we come back, we're going to have time to practice the stuff. So for example, one of the things that I'm working on, and I think this is helpful, and we're going to talk about it next week, is I'm working on, really trying to identify that, or not identify, because I know I'm working on recognizing when I'm inserting myself onto another person. So for example, somebody tells you something about themselves, and they say, I'm having a hard time with something. And you say, okay, and you listen. They didn't ask you for your help. They didn't ask you. They just telling you something. And then you jump in, well, how about this? How about this? And how about this? And you start trying to solve the problem for them. Now, that's something that I know I do. And do I know why I do that? Yep. Does it keep me from doing it? Only if I think about it. But I have to process it. But I try to jump in and help people that I care about, because I have had so many times when nobody jumped in for me. Now, I'm not going to say that I ask for help a lot, because I'm a person that don't really ask for help. And I pretty much almost have to be dying, which I think is a terrible habit. I shouldn't judge it. I don't want to judge it. I'm not going to judge it. It is my conditioning. My conditioning is such that I judge myself a lot. And so when I realize that, I try to work on it. And so that's putting your stuff onto somebody else. So if somebody comes to you and they just telling you something, and you're like, okay, they didn't ask you for help. They didn't say, what is your advice? What do you think I should do? But then you start trying to jump in and solve the problem for them. That is your shit. That's not them. And so these are the type of things. So then now, now that I got that, I have that recognition. Now it's like, now let's talk about what in me does that. I know what it is. And now I could talk about, okay, well, now what do I do next time? How do I resist the urge to do that? I have to say, okay, how am I feeling right now? Is this about me? Is this about that person? Is this about what they told me? So those are the kind of things, right? But when you do that in a context of love, right? When you do that in a context of people, that you care about, when you do it in a context of you know of community, it makes it better. It makes it better. So I am super excited. I'm still going to give away a set of Hush Money 1 and 2 for the first 5 people. So I got 3 here, so I got 2 left. I'm going to shut it down unless anybody has any questions. You can reach out to me. You have my email. You can ping me on LinkedIn. And what I want to do is close it out and just invite everyone to the Future of Work Symposium on digital transformation and accountability, because it's going to be 2 days, 10 talks, and 12 need to know thought leaders, right? It's February 15th and 16th at 8:30 in the morning. Those are going to be 25-minute segments. It's only $350. The sponsorship is $1,500 and up. And there is volunteer complimentary live access. Only requirements are you have to have active and current recent profiles on Twitter, IG, and LinkedIn to qualify. but you just have to send an email to contact@gcfft.com. That is the Global Center for Future Forward Thinkers. gcfft.com. That way you can get all the information you need about the symposium, and I will see you there. Other than that, I will see you at the Vanguard, the Future Vanguard, sessions, and we will get it in, and we will get to know each other. In the meantime, I'm going to send all the information that you need via your email, and we will talk soon. Thanks so much for joining, and I'll see you soon.